The Half-Life games had always seemed to escape my attention. To me, they were like an unknown mysterious entity that I knew was responsible for games like Portal, Team Fortress 2, Counter-Strike, Left 4 Dead, and Garry's Mod. These are all modded versions of the original Half-Life games, using the same game engine that Half-Life runs off of, and since I had played all of those games, it only felt right to see for myself what all the hype around the original series was about. So I decided to play Half-Life, and Half-Life 2, as well as all of the additional episodes to Half-Life 2. But before I started playing these games, one of my moderators exclaimed that they thought the Half-Life series was overrated. Shock horror, someone criticized the iconic, critically acclaimed, legendary gaming series Half-Life. This statement was always at the back of my mind when I played through the games live over on Twitch, and now that I have finished all of the old titles, I figured I'd see if I can't indulge the question of whether or not this series is in fact overrated. In my opinion. The way I'm going to tackle this is by first recapping what the Half-Life series is about, as briefly as I can, before looking at public opinion on the game and what gives the series its legendary and iconic accolades. Once that's tackled, I'll go into my own experiences with the games in chronological order, and my thoughts on their various components, like the gameplay and the story. Finally, I'll give my thoughts on the status of the game and whether I think the series is overrated or not. It's quite a lot to cover, so let's get started. There will be spoilers up ahead for Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2, as well as Episode 1 and 2. You have been warned. To recap, the Half-Life series has quite a simplistic story. In Half-Life 1, you play as theoretical physicist Gordon Freeman, who was hired by a research company called Black Mesa to handle and study anomalous objects. During an experiment with one such object, a resonance cascade occurs, allowing aliens to invade the facility. Gordon is tasked with fighting his way through the facility in the hopes of containing this alien invasion, and he faces opposition from not just the aliens, but also the military, who are attempting to cover up this mistake by killing any witnesses. Eventually, Gordon manages to close the portal between the Zen dimension and Earth, and for this, the G-Man, who mysteriously lurks around the facility and seemingly follows Gordon around, offers him a choice. Gordon can either accept employment under the G-Man and be placed into stasis until he is needed again, or refuse and be subjected to a battle he cannot win. The canonical ending of Half-Life 1 is that Gordon accepts the G-Man's offer and gets placed into stasis. In Half-Life 2, we play also as Gordon Freeman, awoken from stasis by the G-Man 20 years after the first game's events, and placed on a train headed for City 17. The city is overrun by an alien force known as the Combine, who have taken over Earth and subjugated the city to a totalitarian rule under Dr. Wallace Breen, the Combine's chosen puppet leader. Gordon is sent here to liberate the city from the Combine, but accidentally makes his presence known to Breen in a failed attempt by Dr. Kleiner to teleport Gordon to a resistance camp, ending up briefly in Breen's office in the Citadel building.
I'm all but certain it was Gordon Freeman.
This alerts the Combine to Gordon's presence too, and they pursue him throughout the entire game, even using weaponized and mutated versions of the aliens from the prior game in order to stop him. Towards the end of the game, Breen attempts to open a portal to allow for Combine reinforcements to enter Earth, as the Resistance begin making several advances onto the Citadel. Gordon and Alex seemingly manage to prevent the opening of the portal as an explosion erupts before them. Time freezes, however, and the G-Man appears in a similar manner to the previous game's ending, saying things, before the game fades to the credits and their fate is left unknown. Luckily, we get 2 more episodes that continue the story. Half-Life 2 Episode 1 picks up right where we left off, with Gordon and Alex managing to escape the explosion in the Citadel with the help of the Vortigons, one of the enslaved alien species you fight in Half-Life 1, which was strange to see. Gordon awakens in the ruins of the city, rescued by Alex and Dog, her pet robot. The Citadel core is still overloading, however, and will destroy City 17 if it detonates. Gordon and Alex re-enter the Citadel to stabilize the core to buy more time for the Resistance to evacuate the city. Along the way, Alex and Gordon discover the Combine want the Citadel to explode, as this will open a portal for Combine reinforcements. They also discover Judith Mossman, who is Alex's dad's partner, uncover a secret from the Combine databases. Alex and Gordon decide to download this information, which makes the Combine even more vigilant in their pursuit. As they escape the Citadel, the Combine set the reactor to overload again, so Gordon and Alex help to evacuate the remaining Resistance members before boarding a different train out of City 17. The Citadel reactor explodes, however, derailing the train and ending the episode. What the hell kind of ships are those? Oh, shoot. Eyeballs. Oh, thank God. Oh, that was it! In the second and final episode, as of present, Gordon and Alex are thankfully okay, and we get to witness the Combine portal for ourselves. Alex and Gordon have to make their way to the White Forest rocket facility with the intelligence they have, but Alex gets fatally wounded and needs to be healed by the Vortigons. The G-Man makes another appearance and says that Alex should deliver a message to her father, Eli Vance, to
prepare for unforeseen consequences. Unforeseen consequences.
When Alex and Gordon finally reunite with everyone, they decode Mossman's message in full, revealing the location of the Borealis, an Aperture Science research ship and Black Mesa's competition. It's important for some reason, and everyone believes it's worth investigating. Additionally, Alex relays the G-Man's message to Eli, and he becomes troubled by this. Eli confides in Gordon that the G-Man provided the test sample in the first game which caused the alien invasion, and whispered the same warning to Eli as Gordon entered the test chamber. He promises to explain more once the Combine portal is closed. The scientists prepare a rocket to launch at the portal, and after Gordon fends off a Combine offensive, the rocket is launched and the portal is closed. Alex and Gordon prepare to go to the Borealis via helicopter, with Eli giving them a word of warning about what the ship's cargo might contain. They get attacked, however, by two Combine advisors. One of them manages to kill Eli before Dog bursts into the scene and fights them off. Alex quickly runs over to her father's dead body, sobbing as the screen fades to black and the credits roll. So that's the Half-Life series in a nutshell. Let's see what people thought about it. Opinions on this series can be split into two camps, the ones that came out around the time of the game's launches, and the nostalgic folks looking back at the games with nostalgia goggles. Now, both of these games were groundbreaking technical accomplishments of their time that revolutionized the first-person shooter genre, so opinions around the time were praising this series for that element in particular, and the 10 out of 10 scores for the games on Steam accurately reflect this. The nostalgic folks looking back on the games, however, have their opinions permanently skewed positively by the legendary status this series now holds in the eyes of nearly every single gamer on the planet. Gary's mod, I feel, plays a large part in this. Gary's mod is a modified version of Half-Life 2 that allows you to spawn in various assets from the Half-Life games and do whatever you want with them. Quite a few people chose to animate them in funny little skits and have them make funny faces, and in turn bring new life to these characters. There's quite a lot of funny videos online like this which use assets from a bunch of Valve games, all of which are based off of Half-Life's source engine. They're incredibly popular, and some sound effects from the first game have even made their way into funny cat videos.
Whoa, no! Ah! Oh no! Ah! 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 You'll want to work quickly. Did you hear something? Stand back. Ah! Hello, Freeman. I'm up here. Oh. Oh my God! Ah!
My point is that there is an enormous amount of content out there featuring Half-Life assets and characters, which was massively bolstered by Garry's Mod's ability to create content using those assets. Content like this has been created for years on end, and quite a lot of people, including myself, remember these creations fondly. This can give way, however, to a positively biased view of the games, remembering them for something that isn't necessarily representative of the games themselves. As a result, you get a bunch of nostalgic ratings that complement the games based solely on its iconic and renowned status alone, without necessarily getting into whether the games themselves are actually good or not. This phenomenon is so prevalent in the Half-Life series that even a lot of the negative reviews are of people telling others to get out of the negative reviews section because the games are just that good. And well, are they? Let's find out. My experience with Half-Life 1 was a rather rocky road. It's a first-person shooter game with platforming and puzzle-solving elements that requires you to shoot aliens and military men in a variety of different ways, as well as use your varied arsenal of weapons to traverse the terrain and complete objectives. Now, I would have admitted fault for making the experience of the game way more taxing than it needed to be by playing the game on the hardest difficulty. However, I replayed a large portion of the game on medium. Playing on the hardest difficulty certainly accentuates the bad aspects of the game, but these flaws are still noticeable even on lower difficulties. One of the main things I noticed that irked me was how hyper-aware the military combatants are. They know where you are nearly all of the time, and are extremely bulky and accurate with their weapons. On later levels, it became frustrating to fight them, and I had to resort to exploiting the manual save system in order to progress certain areas as optimally as possible. Even on medium, where you take less damage from all sources compared to hard, I still struggled to get by some areas without dying multiple times. Some sections are just very poorly designed, and decreasing the difficulty barely compensates for how unfavourable some situations are. There's a section where you drive a tram cart onto a lift and several gunmen are waiting for you here. There is little to no cover for you to hide behind, and if you combine that with the soldiers' hyper-awareness and accuracy, you will likely die here without prior knowledge on how to safely traverse this segment. There's plenty more examples, like the battlefield section with the tank that has tons of soldiers swarming the area, or the Black Ops teams with their invisibility, super speed and high-powered pistols. There's a segment with a helicopter that was difficult to traverse and took me several tries due to the hard-to-hit machine gunner on the other side of the dam. Charge it up to the max then, skaboosh, hit that. As well as it being unclear when you can safely cross the dam without the chopper firing on you. It was also unclear how you were supposed to avoid the shark when you had to dive into the water. The Zen areas towards the end of the game have flying enemies that can hit you from many different angles and take a lot of shots to kill. It's clear the difficulty of the game overall is very unforgiving and frustrating at times. The gameplay is pretty revolutionary for its time, I'd like to emphasize. There's a lot of cool weaponry here for you to use, each with its own mechanics that make them stand out in different scenarios. Having some platforming sections was a nice change of pace in some areas, allowing you to take in the scenery and recuperate for the next action-packed segment. Exploration was rewarding, whether it was with ammo or health items, to getting to see some environmental storytelling or optional events you might have otherwise missed. Even new weapons could be found in these optional areas.
What is this thing? Is it some kind of weapon?
Put that down. It's a prototype.
Why was that such a good point for the explosion to cut off?
Why are we using it?
It's much too unpredictable. Don't let it overcharge.
What do you mean, over?
Oh. Non-playable character AI was also surprisingly smart for the time. You can interact with scientists and guards and get them to follow you or stay put. Scientists would sometimes provide you with medicine, while security guards would shoot enemies for you. Some even helped you progress by using scanners to open doors you otherwise would not be able to open. How far they'd travel with you was pretty limited, but the fact that they have some use took me by surprise for a game made in the late 90s. Most of its gameplay elements are very well designed, even if the platforming was not the most well thought out. I love this game! I love this game! While the game's environments are quite impressive, navigating them can be tricky. Even replaying the game on medium, I got stuck in this vent system not knowing where I was supposed to go. Not having a clear sense of direction on where to go in the game was a reoccurring issue, and was especially prevalent in the later Zen chapters. Should be a cave by the pool. There is one here. Oh! It can be quite the pace breaker when you don't know where you're going, and also compound the frustration from the difficulty of the game. Some sections of the game were just outright unfun and overstayed their welcome, like the green tentacle monster section requiring you to try to sneak around its claw-like arms, which doesn't always work due to the poorly implemented ladder mechanics, where you have to uncrouch to slide up or down the ladder. This inevitably makes a lot of noise that will alert the monster to your location and tends to result in an instant death. The Zen sections were unbearably overdrawn. A lot of bulky endgame enemies with hard-hitting attacks are thrown at you, paired with confusing layouts and annoying platforming puzzles that require leaps of faith with limited airborne control for you to progress. I found it was better to just try and run through this entire section and ignore as many enemies as I could. The railway section is very boring and uninspired. It's definitely a low point for the game and takes way too long to get through, with repetitive environments and unfair combat encounters. While the environments have a lot of detail and do an amazing job at conveying the events through environmental storytelling, a lot of these set pieces can be confusing to navigate, and in the worst cases are quite boring or annoying. The game's story is quite simplistic, but this allows it to be experienced purely through the gameplay, without the need for any control relinquishing cutscenes. This adds a layer of immersion that not a lot of games achieve nowadays. The story very much falls into the background after the introductory sequence, only really surfacing to guide the player to their next objective or explain the motives of the military.
Well, so much for the government. Their idea of the secret is to kill everyone associated with the project. There's an old decommissioned rail system somewhere through here, beyond the silo complex. If you can make it through the rocket test labs, you might be able to worm your way through the old tunnels to track down whatever's left of the Lambda team.
I wouldn't say the story is the highlight. The gameplay is much more the center of attention for most of the game, which is why the ending of the game was so interesting. I was genuinely very excited to play Half-Life 2 after finishing the first game, as it left a lot of questions unanswered. Who is the G-Man? Why is he stalking Gordon throughout the facility? What happened after Gordon closed the portal? What does employment under the G-Man entail? Even if the road to getting to the first game's ending was perilous, it was definitely worth experiencing, and the cliffhanger was well executed, which is a neat summary of my experience of Half-Life 1. It was fun, but it was also equally frustrating. It's a product of its time, and its merits cannot solely be based on how much of a technical marvel it was 26 years ago. Half-Life 2 was a much different experience from the first game. Motherfucking Gordon Freeman! In many respects, it's a direct upgrade from the first in many factors, including the gameplay, graphics, and story. However, it's also safe to say that it experiences many of the same problems as Half-Life 1, though certainly to a lesser degree, and even has its own unique criticisms. The gameplay is very similar to the first. Your arsenal of weapons gradually expands over the game, and you use it to traverse the environment, as well as shoot all the military men and aliens in your way. though your arsenal in this game is not as varied and unique as in the first game, and there's not many situations where you'd favour one gun over another. The SMG, assault rifle, and the shotgun are the only weapons that'll see frequent use throughout the game, and there's not much reason to use anything else unless the game designs scenarios specifically around the usage of a different weapon. Examples of this include the helicopter and strider sections, which force you to use the rocket launcher, or sniper nests, which can only be taken out with grenades. Even Ravenholm is an example where the devs incentivize use of a certain weapon, as just before this level they give you the gravity gun. This weapon utilizes the newly implemented physics system in the game that allows you to interact with the environment dynamically by picking up objects. Ravenholm is designed as a playground for you to utilize and test out this new weapon by giving you a variety of deadly objects to hurl at zombies. Bah! Bah! Nah. Bah! You... Bah! Why are they just stored at bah? Equally viable option. Bang! Though this is the only time you're going to see major use of the gravity gun, unless it's specifically required for platforming to optional areas, grabbing items from unreachable places, or to traverse particularly dangerous terrain like the Antlion region. Outside of these situational scenarios, the ballistic weapons are far superior in most combat encounters because you'll be fighting the Combine for the majority of the game, and I don't think I have to explain why it'd be silly to run around out in the open looking for an object to pick up and hurl at enemies that are shooting at you. It's way more favourable to just take cover and shoot back instantly. I briefly mentioned the physics system, and I do want to give it credit. This system is revolutionary, and I mean it in the highest esteem possible. Being able to freely interact with the environment adds a whole other layer to every other aspect of this game, from the exploration to the combat. Hurling an entire cupboard at a zombie is unimaginably satisfying. But zombies can also hurl things to damage you, and this often caught me off guard. Suddenly seeing a table being launched at your face is quite startling for sure. But it also surprises you in a good way because it makes the zombies much more unpredictable and fun to fight. The physics system is so revolutionary that many other games have utilized it in varying ways, such as Amnesia in a horror puzzle-solving scenario, or Cyberpunk in a combat scenario. Here's a few other games that I know utilize some kind of physics system within the environment. The fact that there's so many, and potentially even more games that I don't know about, shows how incredibly innovative the physics system of this game is, and it's certainly the main standout addition in Half-Life 2. It's a bit of a shame that it's somewhat underutilized and disincentivized due to fighting enemies with guns for the majority of the game. But it's still extremely unique and offers fun experimentation where it is incentivized. Much like weapon variety, enemy variety is also down from the first game. This game leans much more towards the first-person shooter elements, and less so towards its puzzle-solving and platforming elements. Enemy encounters are far less creative for the most part, unless you go out of your way to find the more unique encounters. What the f*** is... Oh... The game does try to create some unique combat scenarios, but they don't all succeed in being more interesting than the regular gameplay. The part in Nova Prospect where you have to defend the control room in the prison with the turrets wasn't really all that engaging, and amounted to me letting the turrets do all the work while I sat back and watched. Some enemies are also far too spongy, with Striders taking half a dozen rockets to fell. I understand they're meant to be a boss-type encounter, and it makes sense if you're only fighting one, but later on in the game you fight like 5 of them, which takes far too long and can get quite boring very quickly. The criticism of some sections overstaying their welcome from the first game translates over to this game well, and the Strider section I just mentioned is a perfect example of this. The vehicle sections are another, and are incredibly lame for several reasons. The first is that the vehicles themselves control like one of those rodeo bull machines. The airboat drifts a lot and doesn't turn very well, whereas the car is extremely stiff and difficult to maneuver. The second reason is their pacing. 1 minute you're drifting between helicopter mines while narrowly dodging incoming cannon fire. The next you're taking a casual drive from one abandoned building to another to turn a crank to lower a bridge elsewhere. If these sections were far shorter and maintained the fast pace of a helicopter chasing you down, I would dig them so much more. Tacking on objectives to do between the blowout set-piece chases was not a good idea, and only serves to break the pacing in an almost whiplash-like fashion. The long-winded elevator ride near the end, where you're just decimating enemies, was also pretty drawn out too, but overall I'd say there was less instances of levels being too drawn out in this game. The sense of direction criticism of the first game also applies here. Ravenholm took me a hot minute to work out because it's a non-linear maze, and the way forward to progress in the level was not always easily discernible. I completely missed this lever because I was expecting it to be somewhere in the building, and not on this balcony area. The vehicle sections are also subject to this criticism, as they are also very non-linear, which contributes to how pace-breaking they can be. There was a section at the beginning of the game where I couldn't find the way forward, so I started stacking boxes to try to reach a higher ledge, not knowing that it wasn't where I was supposed to go. The Nova Prospect prison was another area I got stuck on too, as a prison wall needed to explode for me to enter the complex to progress, but I couldn't find where the hole was, nor did it explode immediately. I want to say this criticism is equally as prevalent in Half-Life 2 as it is in the first game, if not more so. The graphical fidelity of these environments, however, is a massive step up from the first game, and though they may not be on par with modern graphics, the art direction still retains its charm even to this day. Characters are far better animated, looking lively and expressive, though the explanations for how some of them were in the first game is laughable. Like this guard at the beginning of the first game that you speak to for quite literally 2 seconds is meant to be your longtime friend Barney. This guy. Sure. Okay. The environments are on a much grander scale than the prior game with more visual effects. The sound design is incredible, with the Strider guns and the Combine radio chatter being my personal highlights. Oh my, to be fair, as terrifying as Striders are, my ears are in heaven when they shoot. Move it where? That way? Why is he going into the plaza exit? Why am I being taken into security?
Welcome.
What if I don't want to? Okay. Incoming! Ah! The non-playable characters retain their smart AI from the prior game, with medics healing you when you require or ask for it. Though everyone has guns now, including the medics, and this mechanic only gets introduced in the later half of the game. The environmental details are still very neat, and exploration is still rewarded, but only really with finding stashes. The first game had much more interesting things to find, in my opinion, like optional events or pieces of environmental storytelling alongside the items and ammo. The story is certainly a massive step up from the original, being more at the forefront this time around. It retains the same method of storytelling from the first game, with no cutscenes, which helps to immerse the player in the events of the game. The characters are more unique, charismatic and memorable, with the highlights definitely being Alex and Dog, and the objective of the story is far clearer. I was fully immersed in the world and the story being told, and the narrative retained my attention for practically the full span of the game. The only major critique I have of the story is the ending. The game ends in a similar fashion to Half-Life 1, but the cliffhanger here does not create intrigue. After a very bombastic blowout action sequence, Gordon and Alex stop Breen from opening a portal to Combine reinforcements, and as the Citadel explodes, the G-Man appears mid-explosion to stop time. He says a lot of words before the game simply cuts to the credits. This is one of the worst cliffhangers I have ever seen. The first game's ending concludes the events at Black Mesa succinctly, while leaving the player with the mystery of what it means to be employed under the G-Man. There's no significant lingering plot threads left unanswered here. Gordon achieves his goal, and anything else is basically a bonus. In Half-Life 2, we're left wondering if Gordon and Alex survived the explosion, if their actions really prevented the Citadel from opening a portal, and if Wallace Breen actually dies. The game ends practically before the climax of the story, which annoyed me immensely. To make matters worse, if we were to factor in and analyze the additional episodes, it makes me question why the storytellers ended the main game where they did. In the beginning cinematic of the first episode, the Vortigaunts come to rescue both Gordon and Alex, with the G-Man appearing displeased with their hostility. If the storytellers wanted to end on a better cliffhanger that created intrigue for a continuation of the story, this extra tidbit should have been included in the ending. Granted, it still doesn't answer the question of whether or not Gordon and Alex succeeded in their goal, but at least it would feel as though the climax or plot twist was allowed to happen, rather than having the game end just before all the important stuff occurs. If you can't tell already, I have a major problem with the story of Half-Life 2 from here on out. But just like how Half-Life 2 ends, I'm going to put my gripes for the story on hold quickly to talk about the gameplay. The first episode's gameplay is pretty much identical to Half-Life 2. There's a new enemy type that gets introduced, known as the Zombine. He is...
What the hell
he
is
better be
that?
dead.
A combine zombie.
A Combine zombie? Uh-oh.
That's like a zombine. Zombine, get it?
Which is basically a zombified Combine soldier. I know some people struggled against this enemy type because you'd encounter them in enclosed spaces with a lot of exploding barrels, and paired with the fact that this enemy type would rush you with a live grenade, you'd take significant amounts of damage from all the explosions. But I personally had no problems. The antlion dens that you had to cover up with cars was cool, but it felt overly drawn out and overused. Otherwise, there isn't really much different from the base game. My gripes with the story sort of intersect with my opinion about the gameplay, in that this entire episode feels unnecessary as a standalone game. All it amounts to is Gordon and Alex discovering they weren't successful in stopping the Citadel from powering up and opening a portal, so they go back inside to stabilize the reactor to buy time for the Resistance to evacuate City 17, as well as gather information and data. The Combine overload the reactor again, so they look for a way to escape, helping the Resistance evacuate along the way. When they're done and evacuate themselves, the Citadel explodes and the train Gordon and Alex are on derails, cutting to the credits. Not only is this yet another frustrating cliffhanger, but it also feels like a complete waste of time and money in isolation. If this game was tied to episode 2 to make it all one big episode, with a slightly higher price tag, it would probably flow a lot better and feel like a much more fulfilling experience rather than it serving the singular purpose of segueing our characters onto a more interesting story. So is episode 2 more interesting? Well, in some areas, yes. In others, certainly not. All of the criticisms of the gameplay I levied against the main game carry over to episode 2 almost perfectly. Plenty of sections overstay their welcome here, like the vehicle section with Alex as you make your way to Whitewood, and the very dull and overly drawn-out cave section with the healing bugs. Though some sections are legitimately well thought out, like the Antlion defense mission where you have to protect Alex using placeable turrets while the Vortigons heal her, and the Strider assault section where you have to defend the resistance base using Arnie Magusson's sticky bombs to take out the Striders being escorted by hunters. It's a very hit or miss episode,
You play with them balls like it's FIFA!
with blissful highs and gruelingly abysmal lows. I had hoped that, considering this was the last game chronologically, that the ending would be worth the effort. I regret to inform that my feelings towards it are mixed. On the one hand, this ending does a much better job at concluding the events of the main game, having Gordon and the rest of the Resistance achieve their goal of closing the Combine portal and finally allowing the climax of the story to occur. On the other hand, I feel as though the setup for what was to come in the third episode we never got was done rather poorly. Now, it must be understood that the hype around whether or not we'll get a third Half-Life game is unreal. There's plenty of memes and discourse around it, and even a sad video of a kid who watches the ending and asks what happens next.
What's gonna happen in the next one?
Eli, there's not a next one. They didn't make a next one. Does that make you sad? I'm sorry, Eli.
Demonstrating why we need a third game. To be perfectly honest though, I don't think there is necessarily a need for one. The cliffhanger centers around what information Eli had on the events of Half-Life 1 and the G-Man, as well as the mystery of the importance of the cargo aboard the Aperture Science tanker. But in all honesty, the Aperture Science tanker plot thread feels more like a side quest, rather than something that's integral to the main plot, so I didn't really have much of an interest in that. As for Eli, the information he tells Gordon about the G-Man's involvement in the first game was, for me, more than enough to go on in terms of figuring out the G-Man's motives. I can't imagine there was much more to know, which makes Eli's death, and by extension the cliffhanger, seem forced and unnecessary. And that about wraps up my opinion on the entirety of Half-Life 2 and its additional episodes. With all this in mind, I think it's time to answer the pervading question of this video. Is the series overrated? I believe it is, for three main reasons. The first is that I don't believe a game's score should necessarily be linked to its influence on other games. By that logic, I could say that Overwatch is a good game because it revolutionized the hero shooter genre, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is a good game because it revolutionized Battle Royale games, and League of Legends is a good game because it revolutionized the multiplayer online battle arena genre. In many reviews I've seen for the Half-Life series and the general discourse surrounding these games, it gets high praise for revolutionizing the first-person shooter genre, which on its own doesn't say much about the series or how well designed it is as a game. My second point is linked to its public image as a legendary video game due to external factors. Media made within Gary's mod and the successes of other games that were made based off of the Source engine should have very little bearing on how highly Half-Life is praised. To provide an example of what I mean when I say this, let's take a look at Helldivers 2. This is a game where the community collectively bands together to defend a fictional version of our planet called Super Earth from various threats trying to take it over. You play as your own custom Helldiver, doing your part in the war effort in order to fight off the invading forces. However, the deeper you look into the propaganda that Super Earth displays on your ship via a massive screen above the hangar, and the more observant you are about your surroundings during missions, the more you'll begin to realize that Super Earth is not the heroic bastion of freedom and democracy it props itself up to be. The funny thing about this is me merely saying this will brand me as a traitor to the entire Helldivers community, who play into the satire and roleplay as overly patriotic helldivers who buy into Super Earth's propaganda. This accurately reflects the games wherein your own ship captain will punish you for cowardly or treasonous acts within the game by killing you with an airstrike if you stay outside the mission area too long.
They abandoned our mission and our cause. Execution was our only choice.
My point is that the content being made about Helldivers 2 by the community flows from the game itself, accurately reflecting and representing what to expect if you decide to pick it up. Much of the media that reminds people so fondly of Half-Life does not originate from the series itself. Gary's mod skits and other source games like Portal and Left 4 Dead do not accurately reflect what Half-Life is as a series, nor should their successes be used to praise a game that's almost completely unrelated to them, save for the engine these games run off of and the assets used. My final point, and I hope this was conveyed somewhat in my analysis of the games themselves, is that they aren't perfect. As much as these games were technological marvels and innovative at the time, if you strip that contextual gloss away, the cracks become much more apparent. I love this game! I want to end on a positive note though, by reaffirming that I do not dislike this series. The story is quite interesting and was especially engaging in the end of Half-Life 1, as well as in the main game of Half-Life 2 and its second episode. The gameplay was varied and entertaining for the most part, and the mechanics were a joy to play around with. Bang! The sound design is absolutely impeccable, near flawless, if a bit too loud at times, and exploration was fun and rewarding. Half-Life 1 exceeded in this avenue with its optional events, though Half-Life 2 makes up for it with its intensely immersive atmosphere. They're solid games with unique gameplay mechanics, stories, and characters, but also slightly tarnished by flaws that are difficult to overlook at times. Even if I think their popularity is far overblown, I'd still highly recommend these games to friends, if all of them hadn't already played them. If you'd like to hear what I think about Half-Life Alyx, I'd highly recommend you subscribe to my Patreon so you can help me fund a new index controller, as my movement stick is nearing non-functionality, and also so you can vote for me to make that video when I've gotten around to playing it and beating it on Twitch. I'd like to thank all one of my current Patreon backers for supporting this video. Their names should be appearing on screen now, and I hope that I'll be able to add more names here soon. Thank you all for watching this video, and if you want to show your support for free, liking and sharing the video around also helps me out massively. And to those of you who hit that subscribe button, I hope to see you in the next video, or else you may experience
unforeseen consequences.
BANG!